Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sinister Story Hour. I'm your host, Steph. Thank you for joining me. Every week, we dive into a new case of something true crime, cults, paranormal experiences, conspiracies, or anything else sinister. So join me as we delve into each case, and I hope you find it as fascinating as I do. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Sinister Story Hour with Steph. Thank you for joining me for another week and another sinister story. We will get into our story in just a moment. First, I wanted to remind you to join us on our social media and reach out, send your spooky stories. I know you have some. Send them to me at sinisterstoryhour@gmail.com. I would love to hear them. I would love to read them, and I would love to read them on my show in a future episode. So please send those to me. Also, you can find us on Twitter at Sinister Hour, Instagram or TikTok at Sinister Story Hour, and you can now buy us a coffee. And you know how this girl loves her coffee, so you can find us at Sinister Hour. Feel free to buy us a coffee. I think our setting on there is to buy us a pizza, which I really like pizza, so please go on, check into that, and if you love the show, that's a great way to support it. Hey guys, have you thought about making your own podcast, but you're not really sure where to start? That's how I was at first, and really the only choice that stood out to me was Anchor. And let me tell you why. It was completely free to start, and it has all the tools that allow me to record and edit my podcast right from my phone or computer. And they distribute the podcast for me, so it's heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other platforms. There's no minimum listenership, and you can start making money from day one. And really everything you need to make your podcast is all in one place. I love it, and I know you will too. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Ernest Jr. and Charlene Sherer were married in 1976. Ernie Jr. was a real estate investor. He often liked to play poker as a hobby. It seemed like he did dabble in it professionally just a little bit, but most of all, it was just a hobby for him. He enjoyed doing it. They were both described as generous, attentive, supportive people. They both had huge personalities, a lot of energy, huge presence, and they just both, the way they were described, seemed like people that you would really want to be friends with. They had two children, Ernest III, who they also referred to as Skip to avoid confusion, which I completely understand because it was very confusing. Just in doing this research, it was confusing trying to keep Ernest Jr. separate from Ernest III, so I do understand why they did that. And then they had a daughter named Catherine. The family was just really your normal middle-class family, and really, as time went on, just upper well-to-do type of a family. They basically would go just travel during the summers together. They liked spending time together. They would go to Yosemite Park every year for Memorial Day. They would vacation for 3 weeks together each summer. So they just were a loving family, a great family that pretty much everybody wished they could be, right? Charlene was very active in the LDS church, and as anyone knows who has been around people who are LDS, um, it's something that you dedicate a lot of times to. So she did just that. She dedicated quite a bit of time and service to the church. She did raise both of her kids as Mormon. And although Ernie Jr. was never fully a member of the church, he did actually go for one meeting every week. And he did feel like it was important because it was important to Charlene. And so he did also feel that church was good for families. He believed in having a strong family. So he felt that for that reason, he would go to one meeting per week. Both kids were really encouraged to play sports. Their dad would sometimes coach their soccer and basketball teams. So he was really involved when they were growing up, which was impressive. Both kids went to college, and the couple went on to enjoy their time together, seemingly without really even skipping a beat. They didn't really experience the empty nesting part that a lot of people speak of. It seemed like they were just really, by this time, ready to enjoy their life together. They were a wealthy, popular couple among the country club area that they lived in Pleasanton, California, and they were just ready to enjoy their golden years together. On March 14th of 2008, their daughter Catherine had been trying to get in contact with them without much luck. She was trying to get in contact with them for like a week. I mean, it had been a while that she had been trying to contact them. And the next day, they were actually scheduled to fly to Hawaii together. And so it's by this time, she's wondering what is going on. So she does call to have a welfare check done for them. And when they go to actually do the welfare check, they do discover that there was a problem. So they walk in and immediately they can tell that something is wrong. The smell, the scene is very gruesome. I mean, they just knew that something had gone completely and horribly wrong. The couple had been brutally beaten and stabbed, and actually Charlene's throat had been cut so savagely that she was almost decapitated. So that to me tells me that somebody was very, very angry with Charlene, and it really stands out as someone that would have an extreme hatred for her, not just a coincidence of she just happened to be in the neighborhood when there was somebody there. So Catherine and Ernie had both been wearing their pajamas at the time that they were brutally murdered. And that just showed that they were basically in for the night. They were home, they had gone out to dinner that night, and they were just home resting and ready to go to bed that night together. So it just is even more of a horrible scene when you can just picture them relaxing and just having a great night together, having gone out for dinner. And that was just actually their last night together. They were found bludgeoned to death, and they were both laying in a pool of their own blood. Now, like I said, there was already decomposition happening, and they did determine that they had been there for a week. So they start the investigation, and they just don't really even know where to turn. There are a few different leads. Ernie Jr. had been a part of the school board at one time, and so in his time as a school board member, he did ruffle a few feathers, and so they didn't know if maybe he had really made somebody mad back in that time. He had actually, I believe, been asked to leave the school board or had been voted out of the school board. I'm not sure which, but he wasn't really welcome with them. And so it did feel like he maybe had ruffled a few too many feathers back in that day. He had also, like I said, been into the scene of recreational professional poker, and maybe somebody had some grudges from that time. Maybe he owed somebody some sort of debt from that. And so there were a few different leads that police were starting to follow. While investigating the scene, police learned that on the morning before his death, Ernie had won a pretty large sum of money. So he had been out playing poker, and they find $9,000 still at his house. So they pretty much quickly rule out that this is not a robbery. Somebody did not come with a grudge because he owed them money, because $9,000 is a pretty large sum of money. And if I want your money, I'm going to take that $9,000. So he also did have money in his wallet at the time. So he was carrying $750 in his wallet, which is a pretty obvious place to look if you're interested in taking somebody's money from them. With that, they pretty much rule that out right away, that it's not considered a robbery. There are also no signs of forced entry. So they pretty much, they know right from the start that this most likely is somebody that was familiar to Ernie Jr. and Charlene. Their home did appear like it had been ransacked, but there was nothing valuable taken. So it almost stood out to them as like maybe somebody had done it on purpose. They had tried to stage it to make it look like a burglary instead. There were some bloody shoe prints that were found on the scene, and it was very clear that there was a Nike swoosh symbol in the blood print. Now, after they did the investigation and they analyzed those shoe prints, it was determined that it was a size 12 shoe. The problem with those is that they were perfect. They were completely perfect shoe prints. It was a slick tile floor that they had been left on, but the shoe print looked completely perfect. It hadn't been smeared whatsoever. And so police are almost thinking that this was staged as well, because how would it be a completely perfect imprint of the Nike swoosh symbol? So the police start the investigation just like they always start, from the inside out. They start with the children and start kind of questioning the children and seeing if there's anything that stands out to them as far as what they know about their parents. So Ernie the Third had been a pretty normal young kid growing up in a well-to-do family. He had done pretty well in his life. I mean, he went to school, he went to college, he majored in economics at BYU, and BYU is Brigham Young University. It's primarily a Mormon school. And honestly, if you're not Mormon, there's not a whole lot of reason that BYU would stick out to you. Now, he did meet his wife, Robin, at BYU during his time there. And so it does tell me that they both started out being Mormon in their younger years. Instead of actually pursuing a career in economics and staying in the Mormon church, Ernie the Third decided to do something a little bit different. And when he did, it did not make his mom happy. So he pursued a career as a professional poker player. Like I said, his mom did not like this move at all. It was no doubt learned from his father. I mean, his dad often played poker. He loved it. He enjoyed playing. But his mom was not a fan of it. And at his decision to forego his quote-unquote normal lifestyle for his lavish casino life, his mom was not impressed. She disagreed with his choice, and their relationship from then on was completely strained. And one thing I didn't really understand was why it was okay for his dad to go play poker recreationally and sometimes professionally, but she didn't want her son doing it. And I don't know if it was just that she just really had some hopes that he would carry on the Mormon tradition to his own kids, but she didn't like it. And so the relationship was completely strained. They really didn't even speak after that point. So Ernie the Third's new lifestyle did bring him some success. He did have a little bit of a success at it, and he was pretty good at it. He was winning a little bit. You can look online and even see some of his former winnings that he was making. He was rarely, however, with his young family, so there was a cost to all of this. There was a huge cost that he was having to suffer, and I mean, really, it was his family that had to suffer as a result of it, because he wasn't around much because he was traveling. At the height of his career, he reportedly won over $100,000, but I can't help but wonder the amount of debt that he was going into to win something like that. I mean, how much money was he actually forking out in order to win something back? So it just makes me wonder. And it makes me wonder how much of a lavish lifestyle he was portraying to have versus how much debt he was actually going into at the time. Now, speaking of his lavish lifestyle, he had a wife and a young son at home, but he would often pretend to be something that he was not at all. He would pretend to be single when he was traveling, first of all. One of his favorite hobbies while he was traveling seems to be placing ads on Craigslist looking for companionship. He would also have girlfriends. He even had a long-term girlfriend slash fiance. He was planning marriage with this woman. And he would take her on vacations. I mean, he was with her. He met her family. And so it just seemed like they were an established couple, but yet he was married and had this secret life with both of these women. Now, he was showering this extra girlfriend with expensive gifts, trips, dinners, things like that. And his wife knew nothing about it. And so it does tell me that he's spending money that people don't really know about. So he was hiding things the entire time. Now, like I said, it's very usual for police to start from the inside out. And once they start to question him, he really doesn't have that great of an alibi. So he basically says that the night of the murders, he had been home alone. He was 400 miles away. He was home alone. His wife was off visiting family, and he was home completely alone. Now, nobody can really back that up because he was home alone, but he said, I absolutely have things to back it up. You can look at my phone records. I have receipts, things like that. So he gives them everything. So, as they start to piece things together,